Welcome to the Bedrock Way podcast, where we're changing the habits of yesterday by creating the new healthcare reality of tomorrow. And my guest today is Michael Newell. He's a registered nurse with a master's degree in nursing as well. He's the president of Lifespan Care Management, LLC, right here in Haddonfield, New Jersey. And Michael is a graduate of LaSalle University with a master's in nursing administration. Michael is the author of 2 nursing texts using nursing case management to improve health outcomes. That was done in 1996, and Reinventing Your Nursing Career in 1998. His expertise is in critical care and in case management rehabilitation. He qualified as a certified critical care nurse in 1979 and as a certified case manager in 1992. He is founder, president of Lifespan Care Management, LLC, a 16-year-old firm that offers health coordination and advocacy services to those with chronic or catastrophic illnesses or injuries. Michael has traveled and lectured widely on the topics of medical case management and served as an expert witness for civil court proceedings regarding quality of care in hospital and long-term care settings. Lifespan Care Management, LLC, is a health advocacy consulting firm that does privately paid medical case management, serving client families dealing with the challenge of illness. Services include attending doctor visits, care conferences, insurance coverage appeals, medical records reviews, and general problem solving on behalf of clients and their families. Lifespan acts in our clients' best interest, says Michael. And for more information, please visit www.lifespancm.com. Amazing. Amazing. Welcome to the show, Michael Newell. How are you?
Thank you, Andrew.
And today's topic is really predicated on how our childhood becomes the foundation for future health. The title of our episode today is Bridging the Past and Future and How Childhood Shapes Our Health Destiny. I'm going to just start with a question. Mike, tell me how childhood acts as a foundation for future health.
Well, there's a number of reasons why that would happen. First of all, we learn from our parents. We pick up cues about how we should behave and so on. And we have to come up at some point with our own definition of life and what gives us meaning in our life. So those experiences as a child will color our perception of the world, but also train us or teach us how we should respond to the world. In terms of things that don't go well when you're a person, whether you're a child or an adult, it's not what happens to you so much as what your response is. So you may take on guilt, you may misperceive your role there, and that colors your self-concept about, how you fit, whether you're loved, whether you're cared for, whether you're effective, whether you're liked, and so on. And those experiences can color how you behave in the future and color how you see the world. So if you see the world as a threat, then it's always going to be a threat.
I've always been enamored with how the mind and that mind-body connection, and right now the childhood connection, really affects us moving forward in life. The body has such a tremendous way of protecting us from danger. Mm-hmm. And there's something called, epinephrine and adrenaline and all those good hormones that the body releases and chemicals that the body releases when we're in danger and puts us in fight or flight. And then also the body has the amazing ability to secrete hormones like cortisol. Mm-hmm. That allows us to, again, deal with stress and produces a natural anti-inflammatory effect in the body, again, to protect the body, right? Especially when we're young. But when those protective mechanisms are not dealt with appropriately and they become chronic, they actually facilitate the downregulation of chronic disease, right? Because the hormones start to downregulate the body, and that's when you start seeing a lot of these what we call adverse childhood experiences, and then what accompanies those, which can be a number of things. They can be mentally impacting. They can be develop into chronic disease, substance abuse, life expectancy, your immunity, cognitive function, social economic factors. There's so much attributed to that. There was a recent study that mentioned that childhood adversity and childhood trauma was the number one attributing factor to success. Why? When that trauma is managed effectively. And I never thought about that because sometimes, again, I have 3 children. I don't know, Mike, if you have children, but I know I sometimes tend to coddle my children. And sometimes my number one job as a parent is to eliminate any type of adversity, any type of crisis. But it seems like recent studies have shown us that there's a balance, just like there's a balance in everything else. So how much trauma is okay and how much trauma is not okay? Or when do we know that the trauma is not dealt with? So in your role, I'm assuming you're looking at people who have, long-standing chronic trauma that, as you said, helps them color the world. And you can color that world with crayons, erasable marker, or permanent ink. How do you determine between what is dangerous and what can actually be alleviated?
Well, it comes into how is the person functioning, right? So, but my experience dealing with people that have chronic illness or catastrophic illness even and are working through that led me to being interested in, okay, what's behind this? Are we treating the symptom or are we treating the problem?
Love it.
So I want to go back to, how we identify adverse childhood experiences. So there's a little story I want to tell about a medical director at Kaiser Permanente HMO in Los Angeles in 1985, Vincent Folletti. And he had a program for people that had obesity and to help them because, that was costing the HMO a lot of money. And he found that there was a subset, especially of women, that would be successful to a certain point, and then they would drop out of the program. And so he decided to do a little survey of them, and he made up a list of questions, and one of the questions was, how much did you weigh at the time of your first sexual experience? But one day he misspoke and said, how old were you at your first sexual experience? And the woman started to cry and said, I was 4 and it was with my father.
Wow.
And so he backed up and decided he needed to learn more and found out that, all of the women that had an obesity problem had some sort of trauma, whether it was physical, sexual, or emotional. And so he actually wrote a paper, is obesity the problem or the solution? The solution meaning, okay, I'm not going to be approached if I'm overweight. And he found with the boys that the ones that were severely overweight had been bullied. They had a long history of being bullied. So he did a presentation in front of other medical directors of group health plans, and they just blew him off. They said it was completely ridiculous. Nobody ever heard of that, so on and so forth. But somebody from the CDC was there and said, that's really interesting. I'll help you make up a survey, and we'll do the survey and see what happens. So they made up a survey, 10 questions, called the Adverse Childhood Experience Questionnaire. So have you ever been frequently or continuously had these issues: physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse as a child, right? Was there someone in your family that was being abused? Was there someone in your family had a substance abuse problem? Was there someone in the family that was incarcerated? Was there someone in the family was there any time that you didn't know where you were going to sleep or when your next meal was going to be. There's 10 questions. And so he found a significant number of people had at least 4 adverse childhood experiences, okay? And it was actually more prevalent with women than men. So as an adult, you might not have depression, but you might have hypertension. You might not have depression, but you have more difficulty with relationships and feeling. You know, it does play out as we become adults. Now, there is a component where people do learn and are able to overcome their trauma. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, points to people that have had difficult experiences and overcome them as adults and been very successful. But those success stories are 10%. Other people just get destroyed, right? They just never reach their life goals. They're not, in terms of their functioning, their quality of life, their relationships, and so on. But if you see it as a challenge and react to the challenge, and you have a support system to assist you, you're much more likely to be able to overcome those challenges and reach those your own life goals. But it's not just about that we had these traumatic experiences as a child. It's also about what it does to gene expression. Okay, so we found that genes, and a lot of this comes back to the Human Genome Project, that, you know, when they started sequencing genes, we're learning more every day about genetic expressions, about the link between genetic expression and chronic illness. So currently, and a lot of the literature hasn't caught up, especially in the medical literature, to the mainstream practitioners. They don't know much about this at all. But if we look at our genes as a flower bud, right, that is exposed to a toxic atmosphere. It's too cold, it's too hot, blah, blah, blah. You know, does that bud bloom correctly, or does it become distorted? So the genes become distorted when there's this chronic stress, which you may not be under that stress anymore, but the stress is embedded in you and it just repeats. So everything that happens becomes a threat. Everything that happens to you, reinforces your worldview that the world is not a safe place.
But one thing that I wanted to mention to the audience is adverse childhood experiences, and Michael referred to the landmark adverse childhood experience study conducted by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. They found the strong correlation between childhood trauma and adult health issues. Specifically, adults who experienced 4 or more ACEs were found to be at a significantly higher risk for a range of health problems, including heart disease, cancer, chronic lung disease, liver disease, and depression, meaning that you are not only shaping your world, but you're shaping your health. And from a practicality standpoint, you talked about that resilience aspect of adverse childhood experiences and the strategies for addressing ACEs and building resilience. I think one of the topics, Mike, that I want to get into is mental health and really the aspect of suicide and how much that has increased recently due to the economic stability that we have, or instability. Obviously, the COVID pandemic affected our youth quite a bit, the lack of freedom, and sometimes the options were limited. But I have 2 questions. What are the best ways that the youth can manage stress? And how have you seen that the management of stress, or have you seen your work really help those teenagers and young adults who are struggling to really get by and unfortunately be succumbed, by self-harm?
Well, there's a couple issues there. First of all, I think that we need to have supportive relationships in our life. right? So if it's not parents, is there some mentor? So a child that does not have, a parent that can help them, and the parent may be willing but unable to help them because they have their own issues, that they're workaholics. They have to work to keep it together. They have their own issues about expressing love because of their own childhood trauma. And in fact, before we get too far down the road, we pass those genetic changes on to our progeny.
So in essence, what you're saying is that as we raise the future of the world, our progeny, as you mentioned, I love that word, is we got to be careful that they are absorbing and imitating and really conditioning the example that we're providing for them. And I always say to people, and especially parents, we are on stage 24/7. And our actions, our thoughts, and as you mentioned, that they are passed down to our youth is very important. As I hear you talk, I listen to what the self-talk aspect of it, and the importance of manifestation, the importance of meditation, the importance of positive affirmation, and things that really get people out of the funks that unfortunately for some are more temporary, or I should say more permanent than others. But again, I go back to childhood trauma, and are some of these adverse childhood experiences, do you believe that some of them are necessary for an adult? But what I mean is that, do we need adversity and crisis to be able to deal with it long term? Because life is inevitable, right? To deal with crisis and adversity and deal with problems. And sometimes too little of anything creates a problem when you're faced with reality. So that's where I have maybe you can give me a little bit more context on that, Mike.
Stress, is our response to noxious stimuli, right? And so it's not the noxious stimuli itself. It's our response to it. So we learn our responses to our environment. And if we can learn that, okay, stress, an immediate thing that comes up, okay, I have to pay this bill and I don't have the money or whatever it is, but later when you get the money, that stress just should go away. But if you're always stressing, oh my God, am I going to have the money next week, and so on, like that becomes a pattern for you. And if you've ever read any Joe Dispenza,
I was gonna say Joe Dispenza, Metaphysics of Medicine, absolutely.
Yes. So we're hardwiring this maladaptive mechanism into not only our brain but our whole system. So the concept of psychoneuroimmunology, where the brain, the immune system, and the hormonal system are one functioning system. So a lot of times, and what does the immune system do? It first identifies self from non-self. What is a threat to me, right? And if you are being stressed over a period of time, that immune system is going to affect your nervous system, which affects your brain, and your hormonal system, which is not just, your thyroid and things like that, but it's these neuropeptides, which have been identified as the material basis for emotions. So Candace Pert, in 30 years ago said, so you have neuropeptides and their receptors. So the first one they identified was endorphins. We all know, so your body can make its own endorphins, or you can introduce those endorphins by taking morphine or Percocets or whatever. And if you've given it too much endorphin, then your body says, hey, that's pretty good, I want some more, right? And so you get into a pattern, right, that is not helpful because, that's going to interfere with your ability to function, right? And when you have your ability to function impaired, that's going to interfere with your relationships. If your ability to function in a role that's normal for you, it's going to interfere with your self-concept, right? And to back out of that takes a lot of work.
Everything you're saying it resonates with me. I one thing I tell our staff all the time, Mike, is that your thoughts become your actions, which become your reality.
Absolutely.
And that is something to me. And again, you mentioned Joe Dispenza as someone, I've read probably most of his books. And when he talks about the power of the mind and body connection and how the metaphysics of medicine works, and the fact that people who even complain chronically will develop chronic disease, like, chronic orthopedic issues. And he really correlates everything back, to the mind, and the mind being one of the most powerful things that we have, if not the most powerful thing that we have. But I want to change gears. So what sets your care management services, Mike, apart from others in the industry?
Well, I think that my critical care background and my ability to do the insurance appeals, understand how insurance companies think, and so when somebody is getting kicked out of subacute too early, which is a big problem,
Absolutely.
especially with the Medicare Advantage plans that don't play fair. We're able to come in and look at them clinically and understanding the policy benefits of Medicare or whatever insurance coverage there is, whether an insurance appeal is going to be successful. And so I tell families, okay, in this case, it's not going to be successful, so don't try. Or in this case, and usually when the families think they're getting screwed, okay? So, but you need to be, if we do this insurance appeal, you need to go all the way to the end. So there's 3 levels of appeal. The last level of appeal, there's an independent arbiter, right? And that's the way it's set up, and that's where we win. Because the insurance companies they know that if they deny 60% of the people, they'll just go away. If you appeal and you get denied a second time, 60% of the people will just go away. So it's a small subset of people that will actually go to the end, be that committed. But you need to know the language. So whether you're going through an administrative law judge for Medicare, or you're going to a independent review organization that employs a board certified, say, physiatrist to make judgment on whether you need the rehab, rather than that pediatrician that worked for the insurance company that said, no, you don't need that rehab. And what do you know about rehab? You're a pediatrician or you're a psychiatrist opining on head injury. Hello, that's inappropriate. And so, that's, and what we do is try to take the moral high ground here. At the end of the day, we follow the rules. You guys haven't followed the rules. And in our first or second appeal, which was on paper, you didn't respond to the points that we made. And so that's part of the record. And we come to the third appeal. You haven't followed the rules. You haven't responded to our points. And you used the wrong, it was not a peer-to-peer judgment here. And that's where we win.
I love it. I love it. And it's remarkable because, navigating healthcare is so challenging right now. And navigating healthcare for someone who, again, has spent his entire life in healthcare is challenging. Can you imagine the layman person who's not in healthcare? So in your experience, Mike, what's the most powerful piece of advice or insight that you would offer to anyone who has faced childhood trauma and is on their journey to healing and resilience?
Well, I think that you want to be curious about what happened, and so if you can engage a therapist that can help you uncover that, so that you can reinterpret that, because you have embedded in your psyche, in your self-concept, in your self-talk, is certain formulations about who you are, which don't have to be true. You can change. So your thoughts, just Joe Dispenza here, Gabor Mate, again, they, let's change our thoughts to change our life, Mate has in his book, The Myth of Normal, in which he's making the point that what we're going through is not normal. Our society is crazy, right? And so let's not assume that if we don't fit in, that we're the problem here. But anyway, he says there's 4 things that you need to be able to do. One is that you have a sense of authenticity, that you speak for yourself and know yourself. And he says a lot of people that have chronic illness, they have it because they're too nice. They're trying to be good to everyone else, right? And they're not paying attention to their own body. The second thing is agency, that we, step up to the plate and put it out there that I'm setting boundaries about what I'm going to accept from you and in relationships, and I'm taking care of myself. I'm speaking for myself. The third is anger, appropriate anger. If you're getting in my space, if you're threatening me, I'm angry. But to hold on to past hurts so that you can't process them, you get stuck in that, is inappropriate, and that's going to send you down the rabbit hole, emotionally, psychologically, and so on. The fourth thing is acceptance of reality the way it is, and being okay, I accept the reality. I'm not changing the world. I'm not trying to change things that can't be changed. I'm going to accept the world as it is and navigate through that, keeping in mind my own authenticity, my own agency, and my own ability to understand what's appropriate. I should appropriately be angry about and not. If you look at Kubler-Ross, right, the stages of death and dying, right. So the stages of death and dying are the same stages that we go through with illness or chronic illness. First, denial, right? People have diabetes, they're having symptoms, they didn't even go to their doctor and ask, why am I peeing so much? Or why am I this? You have diabetes. Okay. Second is anger. But that anger doesn't need to be anger. It could be just arousal. I'm going to do something about this, right? Then there's the bargaining, right? Then there is, according to Kubler-Ross, depression, but it's also a loss of energy, right? I'm just exhausted, okay? Now, here's where there's inappropriate treatment. Yes, let's give you some Xanax. Is that helpful? No, it gets in the way of that person being able to process what they're going through in the face of loss. Okay, so you don't need a pill, you need a counselor. You need someone that cares about you, so it can reinterpret the reality of what you're going through. And then the last is acceptance, which in Kubler-Ross with death and dying, it's okay. I'm ready to go now, which some people aren't. Some people go out crying and screaming, right? But acceptance, okay, I'm going to accept the reality, and then make adjustments about how I'm going to go forward.
I did a little research before the podcast on just the top ways, and you hit on a lot of them, and the best ways to deal with childhood trauma. And again, it's a very complex and challenging process, but there's definitely several effective strategies to do so. And I wanted to kind of end the podcast with identifying these, and I think you hit most of them. Number one, seek professional help. Don't try to solve it yourself. I think finding someone, like you said, an effective support system, the community that understands the trauma, and educate yourself about the trauma. Learn the effects of the trauma. You talked about the brain and body, Joe Dispenza connection. I love it. Your thoughts really controlled, your life. Practice self-compassion. Be kind and patient with yourself. Healing from trauma takes time. And I think sometimes, we live in such a fast, rapid world that we don't give ourselves time. Build a support network. I love that. Surround yourself with supported friends and family members who understand your journey and can provide emotional support. Mindfulness and relaxation techniques. You talked about that, the meditation, the manifestation, deep breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation. All that stuff can manage anxiety and stress. Express your feelings. You said that, right? We got to know more sometimes. So consider keeping a journal to express your thoughts and emotions. Some people also find creative outlets like art, music, or dance to help them process trauma.
Right, so you can be in the moment. So you want to be in the moment and not have past thoughts, narratives cloud you up, like the whole monkey brain idea, right?
Exactly.
So when you're doing music, when you're doing sports, and you're doing something that you love, you're in the moment, and that is a respite. So we all need respite at some times.
Love it. Establish healthy boundaries. So learn and maintain boundaries. Know when it's okay to say no and prioritize your needs. Practice grounding techniques. Grounding exercises like focusing on your senses, using physical objects can help you stay present in the moment. Medication management, but I think responsibly when it's done, and they may be prescribed, such as people have symptoms of depression, anxiety, or sleep disturbances, but definitely have it under the supervision of a trained psychiatrist who knows how to do these. Engage in physical activity. Listen, I'm a physical therapist, as you mentioned. Regular exercise can have a positive impact on your mental health,
your mood, your hormones,
absolutely,
the whole thing.
One of the most powerful anti-anxiety medications, and it has very little side effects, if any, right? Join support groups. We talked about that. Safety planning. If your trauma is related to ongoing danger or abuse, create a safety plan with the help of professionals like yourselves. And most importantly, forgiveness and healing. Healing doesn't necessarily mean forgiving the perpetrator, but it can involve forgiving yourself and letting go of self-blame or shame. Not choosing to forgive or not choosing to forget, but choosing to move on with your life.
Right.
And not letting the past dictate the future. Mike, I really enjoy this. This is probably a topic that we probably can do, much more than an hour sit down, but I really enjoyed the sit down, and I would love to be able to establish a relationship with Lifespan, with you, and really offer your services to our patients and really to our associates as well. I think sometimes these childhood traumas, are evident in our care staff who are trying to take care of others, and again, manage them through that Kubler-Ross stages of grieving, not necessarily to death, but potentially managing the death of others. So I appreciate you today, and really I enjoyed this conversation a ton. And remember, we are changing the habits of yesterday by creating the new healthcare reality of tomorrow. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you.
Okay, thank you.